Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. Last week, we announced some exciting news that Wordfence has been authorized by the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Program as a CNA or CVE Numbering Authority. I know, lots of acronyms, and you might be wondering, what does it mean and why does it matter? Well, it matters quite a bit, and today we're talking about how Wordfence is even more empowered to protect WordPress. Stay tuned. We'll be back to talk all about it. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Wordfence Live. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. Today, we're talking CVEs and CNAs and all of the other acronyms. I'm sure we can find a few others today on the show. In case you didn't read the news, last week, Wordfence is now authorized by the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures CVE program as a CNA, or CVE Numbering Authority. This means that Wordfence can now assign CVE IDs for vulnerabilities found in WordPress core, in plugins, and in themes. Now, what does this mean for Wordfence, and what does it mean for WordPress security? Well, in short, this will allow us to accelerate security research and also allows us to do even more to protect WordPress sites. This also means that you can now report a WordPress core, plugin, or theme vulnerability directly to us here at Wordfence. Joining me in just a moment will be Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain. I want to catch you up with all this news and talk about what these acronyms mean and what this news means for WordPress and Wordfence users moving forward. Remember to hit the like button below the video here, as well as the subscribe and bell buttons. If you do, you'll be notified when we go live or when we push a new video out to YouTube, which we do from time to time, helping you set up a different feature, or when we put a new feature out to help you get familiar with that. We go live on Wordfence Live on YouTube each Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Let's get started by bringing in our threat analysts, Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain. Ram, how you doing over there?
It's going to be 113 today, and it is not a dry heat anymore. Like it's not like huge humidity, but we were overcast yesterday, so yeah, I'm staying indoors.
Enough said, huh? How about you, Chloe? What's up over there?
I'm doing good, but I'm totally sunburnt and like my shirt is hurting my shoulders. So I could be better, but yeah, the heat, I'm not liking it.
Off to a good start. So, we're talking about the CVE program and CNA programs. Before we get into that, let's talk about a different program, our swag program, right?
Ooh.
We're going to get a link into chat, and you're going to have a multiple choice question. First 5 to answer correctly will win some swag. What does CVE stand for is going to be your question. And remember, if you win any swag and you'd like to share, go ahead and send us a picture here, and you can do so by sending that into our queue. We'll put the email into chat. However, let's get ready to dive in here. Chloe, I think you could probably tell us about this CVE program. What's this news about here?
Yeah, so the CVE program is a community-driven effort to maintain a list of CVE IDs, which are a way to track vulnerabilities and exposures. And so it's a community-based effort to make a list that's easily accessible, easy to track vulnerabilities, easy to identify vulnerabilities. And within the CVE program, there's the CNA program, which allows organizations to register as a CNA, which is a certified numbering authority, which means you have the authority to assign CVE IDs to vulnerabilities within your scope. And so most scopes are usually for their own, for the organization's own products, and then maybe third-party products that they research but is not covered in another CNA scope. However, there are some unique situations. So HackerOne is a good example. It's a managed bug bounty program. And so that organization has the ability to assign CVE IDs for vulnerabilities reported to the organization. So, WordPress has one, for example, so they can assign CVE IDs through their managed bug bounty program at HackerOne. And then, there's an independent security researcher that has the ability to assign CVE IDs to their findings. And then there's a few other unique ones. So WordPress is one, for example. Usually the organization has authority over their product, but since WordPress has 40,000 plugins from different developers, and there's independent ones outside of the repository, there's themes and all that stuff, it's hard to have 40,000 developers or organizations registering a CNA. So then you have, us as a CNA now in WP Scan. And so the CNA program is a way to have organizations become authorized to assign CVE IDs to streamline disclosure processes and things, and help distribute the load of, assigning CVE IDs. So MITRE, the top level CNA root, doesn't have to handle all the vulnerabilities in assigning CVE IDs. So it allows for faster response times, faster CVE ID assignments, streamlining disclosure processes, and all that good stuff. So it's a really important program, and we're really happy and excited to be a part of it now. And we're hoping this will help us continue to grow and contribute to the WordPress security community.
Yeah, and if your organization, makes software or hardware, or is, an industry leader in, a space where there's not really a CNA covering that scope, you're strongly encouraged to try and become one yourself, or have your organization become one.
And as you kind of mentioned there, Chloe, this is particularly exciting because, as you said, with a scope like this, you typically might not see multiple different CNAs, but, lots of potential vulnerabilities, and there's a lot of plugins and themes, and there's a lot in core. So we're really excited to be here and to be able to do this. So Ram, how about a little history on this CVE program?
All right, well, I will try not to get too in-depth, but basically by the late 90s, it was becoming pretty obvious that cybersecurity vulnerabilities were not going to be, going away anytime soon, and that, organizations, governments would need a way to keep track of them. Even with, the much smaller number of different vendors out there at the time, it was still becoming sort of a problem where, people would have their own internal databases and whatnot. Anyways, a couple folks from MITRE Corporation, David E. Mann and Stephen Christie, wrote a white paper that they presented to the second workshop on research on security vulnerability databases back in January of '99. So yeah, this was already the second workshop. So, this is one of those hey, this is something we need to figure out. Anyway, the concept really took off, and they formed a working group. And that working group would eventually become the original 19-member editorial board for CVEs. And they started out with 321 original CVE entries. And the CVE list was officially launched for the public in September 1999, which, I mean,
Quick
for something
turnaround.
for white paper to working group to organization and public list in less than 9 months, that is amazing for a committee-driven, community-driven effort. That is just astounding, and that really shows just how immense the need was for something like this. Though, I mean, the way that it's implemented is very reasonable, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So the cybersecurity community endorsed the importance of CVEs via CVE-compatible products initially back in '99, and as soon as December 2000s, there were already 29 organizations participating with declarations of compatibility for 43 products, major OS vendors, that sort of thing. We've kind of increased that a lot, and today there are, just counting CNAs, there's 171 CNAs, including 98 in the US, including us. So yeah, it's kind of taken off. There's also, if you want some more cool stats, there's 155,000 CVE records, slightly over that actually. But so yeah, that's a lot of vulnerabilities. Yeah. Anyways,
very cool.
A lot of vendors and organizations include CVE IDs in their alerts to, make sure that it's very clear what the vulnerability is, what versions are impacted, and they also assign them a CVSS, or Common Vulnerability Scoring System score, to let you know how severe the vulnerabilities are. I mean, they'll often talk about the CVE ID for like Heartbleed back in 2014. That has a specific CVE identifier, and having the CVE identifier is often super useful for Or do you remember Spectre and Meltdown? That wasn't just one or two vulnerabilities. That was actually like a set, and each one needed its own CVE so that you could be sure of what was impacted by it. So, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, one of the government agencies that deals with standardizing stuff, released a special publication, 800-51, on how to, use the CVE system and scheme. And at this point, basically, it's one of those things that's used by the government, industry. It's basically a sort of like international standard of keeping track of vulnerabilities. So, yeah.
You had mentioned CVE IDs. I believe we just showed one there. Chloe, can you give us a little more background on what these are for anybody who's not familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. So a CVE to start with stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. And CVE IDs are essentially a de facto standard for identifying vulnerabilities within software components and such. And it's a standardized identifier. So every year there'll be a new set of CVE IDs. So 2021, it would look like CVE-2021-1234, for example. And then back in 2014, it would be CVE-2014-1234 as another example. And every year those sets will change just to correspond with the year. And these are a way to track vulnerabilities easily, communicate with other researchers, with organizations, with security managers and everything to track vulnerabilities. And one of the things they're used for is, security response. If you ran a vulnerability scan, for example, it would come back with, CVE, blah, blah, blah. And then you would be able to look up that CVE ID and then prioritize, your response based on that information. And so it's just a way to standardize how vulnerabilities are communicated, because several components within something can be vulnerable, as Ram mentioned, and you can track each vulnerable component within that vulnerability that with different CVE IDs. And so it's just a way to make things easier to track and everything. And so I will go ahead and show you the list of CVE IDs just real quick here.
We had a question from Will.
Go
Is that what you were going to talk about, Scott?
Yes, it was an interesting question. I'm curious to hear.
And the answer is it depends. There is when we submit CVEs, there is a field for any workarounds or what should be done to remediate the issue. It's just like if the answer is apply this patch located at this URL, or if the answer is update the plugin, or if the answer is just delete the thing because there is no patch. Realistically, ideally, when submitting the CVE record, the remediation should be included in the initial submission. But it is possible to update submissions after the fact as more information becomes available. That doesn't always happen because it's one of those shared responsibility things where if the submitter finds it, or if the CNA finds it, it depends. It's a federated system, so. Sometimes it'll get done, sometimes it won't, but it is most likely to get done if, the remediation is included within the initial submission. Because not everyone's going to follow up after they submit.
Interesting. Now, Chloe, you're giving us a look at some CVE IDs here.
Yeah, so right now I'm on the cve.mitra.org site, and what you can do is you can go to search CVE list, and then you can search a list. And what I've done here is I've just searched WordPress, since that's our main focus, and I just wanted to show you that you can see the whole list of CVE IDs here. So CVE 2021-3133, a brief description right there, and then you have the whole list for what hit the keyword of WordPress. I think every now and then there'll be a description that doesn't include WordPress in the description, so a few will get lost when searching for them, but this is pretty much a good majority of the WordPress related CVE IDs. And so what you can do actually is you can click on a CVE ID and it will bring up this page. And you'll get the CVE ID here. You'll get a link to the National Vulnerability Database, which has a little bit more information sometimes. You'll have the description field, which is right here. that will describe the vulnerability in question and what plugin or theme, or if it's core that's affected. It should have what versions are affected in there, and it should give you an idea of what the vulnerability actually is. And then you'll have references, so links to where this has been publicly disclosed, change logs, exploits if available, and all that good stuff. It'll have the assigning CNA, which in this case is MITRE. And then you'll have the date the record was created, and then all this other stuff. And then just to show you real quick, you can click this National Vulnerability Database, and then this is more information on the vulnerability. So you can see that NIST assigned it a score of 8.8. You can see the CVE dictionary entry. You can see that this one was modified since it had last been analyzed. And then you can see the advisories again down here and the weakness enumeration. So what type of weakness this was that caused the vulnerability. And in this case, it was a cross-site request forgery. And so this is just kind of how you can look at CVE IDs and the information pertaining to them. And I just realized you can't see my screen probably. You probably can't. Yeah. Let me switch tabs real quick. 1 second. I was showing the NIST and not actually showing it. Share screen, Chrome tab. There we go. That should look a little bit better. Yeah, okay.
There we go.
So this is the National Vulnerability Database. And so you can see the CVE number up here. This one was modified. Here's the CVSS score, which is, how severe it is. This one is 8.8, so it's a high severity vulnerability. The references, advisory solutions, and tools. You can have exploits in this area and everything. And then the weakness enumeration, as I just discussed, and this one was cross-site request forgery, known affected software configurations. So that, I believe, is the versions that it's vulnerable to or up to. And so this is another little way to see information about a vulnerability. And so now I want to show you what it looks like when you search a vulnerability in Google. And let me stop sharing my screen so I don't do the same thing I just did and share a new tab. All right, here we go.
Another good Perfect. Question from Rick. And Rick, we will be covering that in just a moment.
So when I searched this CVE ID, which is one we found a while back in WP Discuss, it was an arbitrary file upload vulnerability. And so what happens when I search the CVE ID is I have all these different references, publications, all this good information about this vulnerability. And so basically the CVE ID is providing me with a way to easily track this vulnerability and easily look up any information about it. So I can look for new vulnerability, or not vulnerabilities, but exploits down the line. I can look for any new information found about this vulnerability. And it's so much easier than searching vulnerability in WP Discuss. And this gives me a better way to track all the information about the vulnerability. And so that's one of the really important things about CVE IDs is it makes it easier to track and manage and communicate. And so that's one of the benefits about it.
Also, I'm not saying that having a lot of CVE IDs to your name makes you elite hacker, but I'm not saying that.
So are you elite hacker?
I don't know. And I'd say you're the elite hacker between us, but...
Well, I think you are too.
Aw.
Well, we used to have a leaderboard for that conversation, I believe. But let's jump over. Chloe, let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we decided to become a CNA.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we decided to become a CNA is that we wanted to be able to streamline our public disclosure process. And by being able to assign CVE IDs to our own findings, we can streamline our disclosure process. So with every vulnerability that we disclose, we can immediately assign a CVE ID to that vulnerability. So you may have noticed when we publish a vulnerability disclosure, we have like a little thing at the top that says like the title, the plugin slug and such, and one of those fields is CVE ID. And as soon as we published, we would have to put pending in that field because we wouldn't have a CVE ID immediately assigned when we publish those details. We'd have to request it from another CNA and then wait a little bit to get that CVE ID assigned and given back to us, and then update that field. So by becoming a CNA, we don't actually have to wait for that anymore, and we can publish our findings and publicly disclose those with the CVE ID. So, larger organizations people managing security for WordPress sites and everything, they don't have to keep checking back on our site to get that CVE ID to communicate any findings or issues or anything. They immediately have that CVE ID. They immediately have validation that this is a valid vulnerability. And so they can take, response quicker, I hope. And so, sometimes organizations will communicate vulnerability findings through CVE IDs and such. And so it's just a way to validate the research, and so that this is done immediately rather than waiting and having people need to check back to the blog post to get that CVE ID and things like that. And if you handle the security update and patching, perhaps in your procedures you have to put a CVE ID for each thing that you resolve. Then you have it right away. So it's just one of those things that helps streamline that process. Another reason we wanted to be able to assign CVE IDs is that we wanted to receive more reports from security researchers directly to us. And this is for a couple of different reasons. So one of the reasons is that we would love to get direct reports more often so that we can make sure our customers are protected immediately once vulnerabilities are discovered, and so that they have that protection immediately before things become widely publicly available. So that's one benefit for our customers. And then another one is that we now have a way to incentivize researchers to report to us, and we can help them, get started with vulnerability research. If you're new to it and you think you found a vulnerability, and you want to get your first CVE ID for finding that vulnerability, you can come to us and we can help you walk through the responsible disclosure process, the writing the proof of concept, all that stuff. And then in the end, you'll have a CVE ID for your finding, which I do believe a lot of researchers like having. It's good to put on your resume, and it's good to communicate your findings with others and validate your finding. So yeah, it was one thing to help benefit and improve the security of the WordPress, improve the security of the whole WordPress ecosystem, and just continue to try and help the community in whatever way we can. So with security researchers in this example. And then one of the final reasons we wanted to become a CNA was just to be a part of the CNA community. It's a group of so many different organizations that you are now a part of, and we get to be a part of that community. And so with Wordfence, we're a part of the WordPress community, and we just like getting involved with communities. So it just made sense for us to do it. Do you have anything to add to that, Ram?
I mean, not really too much to add. I think that we can dig a little bit more into what it means for our customers in particular. Specifically, as soon as we find out about a vulnerability, we basically triage it, try to find out whether or not it needs a firewall rule or if it's already covered by our existing firewall rules. So the sooner we find out about a vulnerability, the faster we can protect our customers. I mean, obviously, if we're the ones who discover the vulnerability, then we can write a rule right away before doing anything else. Whereas if we find out about a vulnerability after it becomes public, then that does give a little bit of potential lead time to attackers. So the more reports we get from researchers directly to us, the faster we can get our customers protected. And I feel like that's important to some extent. But it's not just about our customers. It is about the entire WordPress community. The more avenues there are to disclose potential issues. I mean, we do receive reports from users about vulnerabilities. And, a lot of the time the vulnerability is covered by an existing rule and the user is able to get in touch with the vendor on their own. But, on occasion we've had to, help get in touch with vendors. People know who we are. So, yeah, we want to encourage that to keep on happening. And, we do want to receive more reports. And, the more people there are researching WordPress security, the safer WordPress is going to be. And going through the correct channels and practicing responsible disclosure. So I feel like this is a way for us to, help contribute to that.
I don't think it'll be too long before we have a Wordfence Live viewer who maybe reaches out to us and we give them a hand with this,
Yeah, I'm going to give it about 3 weeks or so. So it's going to be Yos. It's totally going to be Yos.
we hope that you're watching, Yos. Speaking of the Wordfence viewers and customers, we appreciate you stopping by. I see Rick and Jill. Mark and Will, we had some good questions. I believe Jill is from PA as well, so Pennsylvania is represented very well here on live today. So we appreciate everybody stopping by. So we're talking about what this means for WordFence customers and the WordPress community. You know, a lot of what we do, we're helping out the WordFence customer the best we can, but you know, we take pride in helping out WordPress as a whole as much as we can, and that's what this is about. So, Chloe, I think we can touch on. Yos is certainly watching. How somebody could report a vulnerability to us, right?
Yeah, so how to report a vulnerability to us. So what you can do is you can send an email to us at security@wordfence.com. And what we ask is that you send us a concise description of the vulnerability. So just give us a little bit of information about the vulnerability in question, what type of vulnerability kind of thing. And then we ask that you provide us with a proof of concept in the best way that you can. If you can't do it, and that's totally okay. We'll work with you on that, but just give us a little bit of a bigger description. And when I say proof of concept, this can be any form of a proof of concept. So it can be, you giving us step by step how to do it. It could be you providing us with a video on how to exploit this vulnerability. It could be a working script on how to exploit this vulnerability. Any way that you can prove that it's a vulnerability that can be exploited, we'd greatly appreciate it if you sent that along with your request. And then what software component in our scope is affected. So any WordPress plugin, theme, or core. And one thing I want to mention here is that WordPress Core actually has a bug bounty program. So you can actually submit those to HackerOne through their bug bounty program, and you can actually receive money for your findings. So if you don't know how to do that, we'll actually we'll be happy to help you work through that process so that you can make sure that you get paid for your findings with WordPress Core. But make sure that you send, what vulnerability is affected or what vulnerability, what plugin or theme is affected. And then if it's core, just what version you tested and such. And then the version number affected. So what version are you aware of that has the vulnerability? So it could be like 1.0 to 3.4, if you know those are the vulnerable versions affected. If you're not sure up to what version, like if you're not sure that it starts at 1, you can just say anything below 4.0 is affected, for example. And then we'd like to have the name of the individual that you would like credited for the discovery. And then if you would like to remain anonymous, and you can just say so, and that's totally okay.
You can also use your Elite Hacker tag, by the way.
Yes.
You're allowed to do that. You don't have to give your legal name for the credit.
Absolutely. And then you can give us any other information as appropriate. So if you've already published the details of the vulnerability, then we would love to have the link to that reference so we can include it in our disclosure and include it in when we're assigning that CVE ID for you. So yeah, any other information that you think we need to have, then that's great. And then if we're missing anything, we'll just work with you and make sure that we get everything we need, make sure that you have everything you need. And we just want to work with you as best as we can. And
Rick had a question about, can they expect a training program to find vulnerabilities? But we've had some videos and live instances in the past that kind of talked about that, right?
Yeah. So this is a perfect moment to remind you that you can be a vulnerability researcher too. I believe that anybody can become a vulnerability researcher in WordPress. So as long as you take the time to do it and learn, you can do it for sure. And so this is just a reminder that we've covered how to find vulnerabilities and exploit vulnerabilities on Wordfence Live several times in the past, and we'll probably do it a few more times in the future. But we do have a bunch of links, and Adam is sharing those with you, so you can check those out and review those, maybe go through them and then see if you can find a vulnerability in a plugin on your own, and then report it to us, and we can get you your first CVE ID if you're new and starting out. And if you're not new and starting out, we can still get you a CVE ID. And then if you think you found a vulnerability, again, just report it to us and we'll work with you. Yeah, I think that about covers that. Oh, I'm working on a paper. I promised this like 2 months ago. I'm still working on it, and I'll have a whole guide for you guys here soon on how to find vulnerabilities in WordPress. Well, not.
Oh, don't forget the Trello board too.
Yes, I do have a Trello board on things that you can look for. I don't have a link right now, but
our viewers love Trello boards, though, so we need to be sure to get that out. I see Adam shared his Elite Hacker name there. So if
What is that?
anybody
Oh
else
yeah.
has one, be sure to share it with us. Would be interested to hear. Speaking of names, we have some swag winners who are now certified. We got Karen, Malcolm, Rick, Brad, and John. Congrats to you five for submitting the correct answer. What does CVE stand for? Go ahead, give it to us, Chloe.
Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures.
That was a good one there. We appreciate everybody who submitted their answer. Remember, feel free to send us in your pictures, whether they are of fluffy animals or you and swag or the swag itself. That's
We also accept scaly animals.
yes, that I should, yeah. Don't want to leave them out. Any animal is fine. We will. I'm sure we'll think it's cute. We love seeing animal pictures here on Wordfence Live. We usually have one or two. I don't know if we have any today. We'll leave it open just in case we do. Now, we covered a good bit there. We covered all the acronyms, Ram, Chloe. Anything else before we start to head out? And feel free to send over any questions if anybody has any.
I think we covered about anything or everything, but yeah, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
There was a question if you own a snake.
I sadly do not currently have any pets. I'm not in a particularly pet-friendly place or apartment, but it's in the works. There's going to be an entire menagerie at some point.
So you're open to it in the future. We appreciate the congrats there, Susan. Thank you for stopping by. I do see Yos is in the chat. Okay, so now's a good time to bring up the mailing list. What better time than now to be subscribed to the mailing list? With us assigning these CVE IDs and getting things out faster than we were able to before. Go ahead and make sure you're signed up to the mailing list and be the first person, one of the first people to hear about these issues, these vulnerabilities that we're getting out. If you're a free user, you're going to want to go out and update your plugin, maybe switch to something else. We always include great information in our posts to let you know exactly what you need to do. If you're a premium user, you're going to be covered by our premium firewall rules that we get out very quickly after finding these issues. So that's the first thing you want to do. You can also sign up to our podcast mailing list. Ram? I think we were just on episode 121, and if I had to guess, did we talk about anything in Google at all there?
Well, we did talk about the fact that we became a CNA. So
that is for certain. Yes, I believe there was an Android bug, if I'm remembering correctly. So,
oh yeah, there was also an Android RCE that was pretty scary. We covered a number of. We generally cover whatever exciting cybersecurity is happening that week. So stay tuned because we've got a lot of stuff this week, just like we had a lot of stuff last week. And yeah,
always something new in security.
Yeah, it has been a year for security.
Yep, and we certainly are not done yet. We should mention, though, that we're still helping out K through 12 public schools. We initially started out in the United States with that, offering free site and security audit services to those of you in K through 12 schools. We've expanded that after support. So anywhere UK, Canada, Australia, and elsewhere, these are K through 12 government funded or state schools. And if you're not part of a K through 12 school, you're having site issues, maybe you think there might be an issue, that's a perfect time to order a site audit there. I believe it's a nearly 60-point inspection that we do, Chloe, right, going through and just letting you know anything that's out of place there.
Even if it's the blinker fluid.
There you go. We take a look at everything. Site cleaning as well. If you know your site is hacked, you can just skip the audit, go right to the site cleaning, and we'll clean. If there's malware on the site, it will be removed, and we'll get rid of that. Last but not least, we're hiring here, and we have great benefits. One of my favorite is free coffee each month, right, Ram?
Oh, yes.
Ram takes advantage of that. Ram is always making sure to be caffeinated pre-live whenever we get going here. So many awesome benefits here. Paying for certifications. Ram, you had a number of certifications.
Yeah, I just finished school, and yeah, I got like, I want to say 10 or 11 certs out of it. So
Okay, what am I missing? You definitely want to check out FastorSlow. You have a website. It's on WordPress. Go over to FastorSlow. 18 locations, I believe, around the world. So it'll give you a good idea of how your site is measuring and being seen around the world, how quick it is. And there's a lot of great information on FastorSlow.com letting you know what each metric means. And there's a lot of them. And it's something we're working on still a lot. So keep an eye out there. You can set up your site with your email to get reports regularly, and you certainly can't beat it for the price of free, similar to Central and Central Team. So go take a look at everything. Ram, Chloe, anything else to add before we head out here?
just that we always appreciate you watching. So yeah.
Thanks everybody for stopping by. We'll be back next week with some more, and until then, have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch you here soon. Thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Wordfence. We have better hackers.